Good morning. Who's happy to be here today? Raise your hands. Woo! Excellent news. Welcome to you. Welcome old friends and new, young and old. You are an essential part of our beloved community. Whether today is your first or your 1000th Sunday in our midst, we are stronger because you are with us today. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities, and genders. We are all growing, all learning, all loved. Just as you are welcome here. And a warm welcome to those of you watching out on YouTube today. Good morning. For those of you here in person, please join us for coffee hour following the service in the parish hall. We are grateful to be here together to seek, to share, and to worship in this beautiful place which has been the site of human gatherings for many thousands of years. We meet on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee people, and we wish to honor the ancestral guardians of this land and its waterways. Today, many indigenous people continue to call this land home and act as its stewards. May we remember that the responsibility to share and care for this land extends to all people, so this territory may be a healthy home for generations to come. My name is Julie Taylor, and I am the worship associate today, and I am pleased and honored to have Cathy Harrington, our interim minister, with us today delivering the service. Holy Heresy. Holy Heresy. I am so excited to hear that. Announcements are found in your order of service and the weekly e-blast, but I'm going to give you a couple of shout outs. One, this is a really good one, guys. Following the service, there will be an information and question session on the proposed 2024 budget in the Alliance Room. There will be another opportunity to discuss the proposed budget next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. in the Alliance Room. So for those of you who don't know, this is our time of the year where we decide on what the budget is going to be. Our finance committee commits to all of that, and you have the opportunity for input at these budget meetings. So if this is something that drives you, come to the budget meeting, because next Sunday, you know what next Sunday is? Who knows what next Sunday is? You, Bridget, what is it? The congregational meeting. Okay, this is a part about how we are a democratic faith, and this is part of that whole business of being a democratic faith, which is truly a wonderful thing. Now, here's another thing. There is a brief meeting for welcoming friends right after church in the Marge Gardner room off the kitchen. So this is welcoming friends. This is our visiting stewardship program. But Martha says, if you would rather go to the budget meeting, please go to the budget meeting. Now, I know that there's choices here, but please understand that you could go to Welcoming Friends today and budget meeting next Sunday too, so you can still do it all. There's still a chance for that. Speaking of doing it all, I'd like to welcome Mary Lou Hill. Mary Lou would like to say a few words about a wonderful thing that she runs.
Thank you. I don't run this. I run it in cooperation with Sharon Walker, who invited me to help her start a band book club last year. And there's a really nice description of what some of the things going on with the band book club in this insert, so please read it. I just want to underline a couple things in it. To begin with, next weekend, along with everything else that's going on, there's going to be a table in this room over here after church from Burning Books, and they are going to be selling banned books. So please visit the table. They can also tell you about all the things that will be going on that they will be sponsoring, at least during Banned Book Week, which begins next a week from today. And there are some cool events going on in Buffalo about banned books. One cool event that's happening next Wednesday is we will start meeting again on Wednesday, October the 4th. The Banned Book Club of the UUCB meets the first and third Wednesday of every month, except for Christmas week, and we don't meet in the summer. And I have the list of books that we chose. They include books that are being banned today and books that have been banned historically. If you would like a copy of that, I'm happy to give it to you. And also, if anybody can't make a meeting and would like to blog about these books, let me know. I have built a blog where people could discuss the books and not have to come to church. That's all, I think. Thank you. 2 minutes?
Thank you, Mary Lou. And a personal shout out, Mary Lou and Sharon have done a tremendous job on this. I even sometimes show up, I haven't read the book, and they still accept me. That's how welcoming this congregation is. So it's great for that. So let's take the time to celebrate and deepen our community by saying hello and greeting our neighbors. Say hello to someone you don't know and maybe would like to know even better.
Joyful noise. It's good to be together again. I'm Reverend Cathy Harrington, the interim minister of this church. The opening words I chose this morning are by Andrea Hawkins Kemper. Blessed are we who gathered with open hearts together in this space today. And blessed are we, the chalice lighters of resistance, justice, love, and faith. Blessed are we, the heretics, the outcasts, the walkers of our own way. And blessed are we, the border crosses, the refugees, the immigrants, the poor, the wanderers who are not lost. Blessed are we, the transgressors, the trespassers, the passers-by, the cause takers, the defiant, the compliant, the heart extenders, the sign makers, the protesters, the protectors. Blessed are we, the trans women, the trans men, the non-binary, the cisgender, the multigender, the no gender. Blessed are we, the friend, the stranger, the lonely, the hidden, the visible, the authentic. Blessed are we who rise in solidarity. Blessed are we who cannot, and blessed are we who do not. Blessed are we, for this is our beloved community, and this is who we are.
please rise in body and spirit and join with me in saying the chalice lighting words as written in your order of service. We gather in loving community, creating a shared vision of compassion and dignity for all to radically transform the world in which we live. Now let us sing. Let us sing hymn number 361 in your gray hymnal, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In.
Story, and this is for children of all ages, young at heart and young. Come forward and sit down here with me. How many of you have heard this book, Enemy Pie? No? All right. Well, this is about a little boy who said it should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a tree house in the backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, yay. And I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood, right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when I struck out at the baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline and didn't invite me. But my best friend Stanley was invited. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed an enemy list. I hung it up in my treehouse, where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Oh, picture, sorry. I'm gonna get rid of this. Okay, so my dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too. But he knew a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. He said, "Tell you how? I'll show you how." He pulled out a really old recipe book off the shelf, and inside was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. And Dad held it up and squinted at it. He said, "Enemy pie." You may be wondering, what exactly is enemy pie? I was wondering too, but Dad said the recipe was so secret that he couldn't even tell me. So I decided it must be magic, but I begged him to tell me anything, something. Well, I'll tell you this, enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Of course, my mind got working. What kind of things, disgusting things, would we put in a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, and some worms, and rocks. He said he didn't think he'd need them, and he gave them back to me. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing on all day. He said, "Don't eat it." Put it back in my mouth. I went out to play alone and I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me. And all the while I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. I tried to imagine how horrible it will smell and what it would look like. But I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, and I smelled something really, really good. As far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen, and I was confused. I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. He said, if enemy pie smelled bad, then your enemy would never eat it, right? So I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang, he put on oven mitts and took it out of the oven, and it looked so beautiful. It was just a plain old pie. Beautiful, plain old pie. I wasn't really sure how this was going to work. What exactly did it do to the enemies? Maybe their hair fell out, or their breath got really stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. But Dad was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing, and while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. He said, now here's what you have to do. I can't do this for you. In order for it to work, you have to spend an entire day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way enemy pie will work. Will you go through with this? And he said, okay. It sounded horrible, but he said, I'll give it a try. All I have to do is spend one day with the enemy, and then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. So I went to his house and I knocked on his door, and when Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. There's Jeremy. He looks like an enemy, doesn't he? Yep. I was nervous. Can you play, I asked. He looked confused. Well, I'll ask my mom. He came back with his shoes in his hand, and his mom walked around the corner to say hello and said, don't you boys stay out of trouble now. So we rode bikes for a while, and then we played on the trampoline. And then we made water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls, but we missed. And after lunch, we went over to my house after Jeremy's mom fed us a wonderful lunch. It was strange. I think I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice, but of course I wouldn't tell Dad that since he'd worked so hard to make enemy pie. So Jeremy liked my basketball hoop and wished he could have one, but there wasn't room. So I let him win a game, just to be nice. And Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. And I threw it and it went over my house and into the backyard. And we went into the backyard over the fence to find it, and there was my treehouse. And he wanted to go into my treehouse. I was the boss. My sister couldn't go in there, and I didn't think I should let Jeremy in there. Oh, please, can I go in it? So he was the only person on the top of my enemy list, which was hanging in the treehouse. He did teach me how to throw a boomerang, and he did invite me over for lunch and play on his trampoline. Okay, but wait a minute. So he climbed up ahead, and he tore the enemy list off the wall. And I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played until my dad called us to dinner, and we pretended we didn't hear him, but then he came and we tried to hide, but he came and found us anyway. So they were having a good time in the treehouse, and guess what happened? Dad made macaroni and cheese for dinner. It was Jeremy's favorite, and it was my favorite too. Maybe Jeremy wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think maybe we should forget about the enemy pie, and I tried to give Dad some, hints. Dad, I think sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood, trying to get his attention, trying to tell him that Jeremy was no longer my enemy pie. I didn't want Jeremy's hair to fall out. But Dad picked up 3 plates, and he put big pieces of pie and vanilla ice cream. I'm getting hungry. And he passed one to each one of us. Wow, Jeremy said. My dad never makes pie like this. It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want him to eat the pie. He was my friend. I wouldn't let him eat it. And I said, Jeremy, stop. Don't eat the pie. I think it's poisonous or something. Jeremy's fork stopped, and he went, but how come your dad's eaten over half the pie? Good stuff, he mumbled through a mouthful. Sure enough, that was all he said, and I watched him eating the pie. And Jeremy ate it too, and Dad laughed, and Jeremy was happy, and neither one of them was losing any hair. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode home on his bike, but not inviting me over to play, but not before inviting me to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I'm still wondering if enemies really do, because I just lost my best enemy. And that's the end. So what was your favorite part of the story? Yes.
When he was thinking
His hair would fall out. Yeah, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Or his eyes would turn green or something. How about anybody else have a favorite? Yes?
it's actually not my favorite part, but I think that how is being nice.
Oh, you think that how the enemy pie works is that you're being nice and suddenly you find out that Jeremy, your friend, your enemy, is a human being and really nice person. It's just getting to know them, right? You're very smart. I thank you so much for your attention and listening, and now we're going to sing you to your classes. I'll see you next week.
Each week, we take a good portion of our Sunday morning offering and give it away to a social justice cause outside our church wall. This month, we are supporting the good work of Fantastic Friends of Western New York, a nonprofit, volunteer-driven social organization for individuals with developmental and intellectual disabilities, providing social and educational events for teens and adults. To support our Share the Plate ministry, you can drop a check or cash into the offering plate, or you can use PayPal by going to our website, uubuffalo.org. There is more information about making a donation provided in the announcement insert of your order of service. Your gifts to support the good work of this church will now be gratefully received. We had friends in the pulpit today. The choir, beautiful job, twice. Excellent. Today's reading is We Are Community by Alondria Williams. The history and legacy of Unitarian Universalism are shaped as much by Emerson, Foz, and Channing as it is by the ancestors in our congregations. We come to it through different avenues: the internet, an invitation, reading the Transcendentalists, or as babies or little kids. I came as a fourth grader to my congregation, the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee. This community helped me bring me into social justice struggles in the world around me and inside the UUA. They brought me as a child to the place where I now work, the Highlander Center. My church opened so many doors because they held young people in high esteem and encouraged our leadership in the church and community. I will never forget going to our district's Journey Toward Wholeness Transformation team meeting, the UUA's anti-racism program, and realizing that I was the youngest person there by nearly 15 years. My religious education teachers, friends' parents, and spirit aunts and uncles were and still are community leaders in everything from nuclear disarmament to anti-racism, anti-oppression issues. They protested U.S. military involvement in Central America and stood behind the parent of a classmate as she transitioned from male to female in the early 90s. They have been my inspiration as I work to support others who are called by their faith to change hearts, minds, and communities. My church changed forever on July 27, 2008, when an armed man came into the sanctuary and killed 2 UU leaders, one a member of TVUUC and the other a member of Westside Church. This rocked our church to its core. When I first heard about it, I didn't know who had been killed. My mom, my friends and their parents, or others who had nurtured me my entire life. I realized something that day that has stayed with me ever since. No matter what issues I have with other Unitarian Universalists regarding our visions of God and Spirit, justice, race, and age, at the root of everything is community, love, and faith. That day, something larger than our individual beliefs rose up in my mind. I thought of the principles, values, and family that are the connective tissue of our faith community, and that held us weeks after the shooting, 6 months later on our 60th anniversary, and still today. I am part of the connective tissue that holds the legacy and future of our faith. I am Church Across the Street, AYS, YRUU, Youth Cons, Journey Towards Wholeness, Groundwork, CUUW or YAN, The Mountain, and GA Youth and Young Adult Caucus. We are the children of freedom fighters, visionaries, and radical liberal theologians. We are the phoenix rising out of the ashes of the McCarthy era and the civil rights, women's rights, and queer liberation movements. We are the survivors and beneficiaries of youth-led and youth-focused beliefs and programming that encouraged us to be change makers, boundary pushers, and institutionalists at the same time. We are and we will be the ministers, religious educators, congregational presidents, organizers, and social change leaders our faith has led us to be. We wear our faith as tattoos on our bodies and in our hearts as testaments to the blood, tears, dreams, and inspirations of our community, ancestors, and elders. Alondria Williams served as co-moderator for the UUA from 2017 to 2020. Yesterday was the 3rd anniversary of her death. Alondria was an incomparable leader, joyous presence, and indomitable force in our Unitarian Universalist community and beyond. We will be forever grateful for Alondria's legacy in our faith tradition.
Thank you, Julie. It's a moving reading. Thank you. So in honor of Yom Kippur, which begins tonight at sundown, I offer this Litany of Atonement by Rob Eller Isaacs. It's in your gray hymnal if you'd like to join me in this responsive reading. 637. Yom Kippur is the beginning of a new year. It's a time to let down and let go of our resentments and our anger and to forgive. So please read along with me what's in the italics. I think it's in italics. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. Forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. We forgive ourselves for each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible. We forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. For each time that we have struck out in anger without just cause.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For the selfishness which sets us apart and alone.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For losing sight of our unity.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have been fueled by the illusion of separateness.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
We especially hold in our hearts today Doug Sherman and Eve Holberg, who are home. Doug is recovering from serious cancer surgery, and I saw them last week. He's doing better, but we still need to hold him in our hearts and send him lots of love and good wishes. So now in this time, let us fill this sacred space with the names of the loved ones we hold close in our hearts this morning, some suffering in sorrow and some celebrating in joy. Let us share a moment of silence for all those names that reside in our heart and are unspoken. The breath of nature is upon us, the spirit of life is within us, and the community of love surrounds us. So be it, blessed be, and let the church say, Amen.
Oh, my name, it ain't nothing. My age, it means less. The country I come from is called the Midwest. I was taught and brought up there the laws to abide, and the land that I live in has God on its side. Oh, the history books tell it, they tell it so well. The cavalry charged and the Indians fell. Cavalry charged and the Indians died. Oh, the country was young with God on its side. Oh, the Spanish American War had its day, and the Civil War too was soon laid away, and the names of the heroes I was made to memorize, with guns in their hands and God on their side. Well, the First World War, boys, it came and it went. The reason for fighting I never did get, but I learned to accept it with pride. For you don't count the dead when God's on your side. The Second World War, boys, it came to an end. We forgave the Germans and we became friends. Though they murdered 6 million in ovens they fried, the Germans now too have God on their side. I've learned to hate Russians all through my whole life. If another war comes, it's them we must fight. To hate them and fear them, to run and to hide, and accept it all bravely with God on my side. But now we got weapons of chemical dust. If firemen were forced to, then fire them we must. One push of a button and a shock the world wide. But you never ask questions when God's on your side. Through many a dark hour, I've been thinking about this, that Jesus Christ was betrayed with a kiss. But I can't think for you, you'll have to decide whether Judas Iscariot had God on his side. But now as I'm leaving, I'm weary as hell. The confusion I'm feeling, ain't no words can tell. The words fill my head and they fall to the floor. And if God's on our side, He'll stop the next war.
Thank you. So in May of 2004, the board president of the church that I soon was to be serving, that just called me to be their first settled minister, the board president called me and said, "I'm sorry that I have to ask you this, but the bylaws require. Have you ever been arrested?" And I laughed a big hearty laugh and I said, "No, but you know, it's on my list of things to do." I was reminded of that as I was reading Rebecca Parker's book, Blessing the World, in preparation for this sermon. She begins one of her essays with, "On occasion, I have said that my career goal is to be tried for heresy." I told you last week about Francis David, who was convicted of the crime of innovation and ultimately died in the dungeon. You have an example of his heresy right outside the church. We do not need to think alike, but to love alike. Rebecca lifts up Hosea Ballou, who in 1821 rejected the doctrine of substitutionary atonement because it didn't make sense under the light of reason. His heretical theory was simply that a loving God would not commend humanity to eternal damnation. And he said, get rid of errant theology, and you will get rid of the clergy, politicians, and public figures who stoke fear in order to keep their own vested interests, personal greed, and moral corruption from public view. Unfortunately, we're still dealing with this problem. So Rebecca Parker joined a group of feminist theologians, and they published a book, Christianity, Patriarchy, and Abuse, offering a feminist critique of the doctrine of atonement in light of the experiences of physical abuse, in particular domestic violence. And they argued that when people, Christians, imagine that God saved the world by requiring that his beloved son die by torture, they intend to identify with this violent requirement and regard suffering as virtuous and redemptive. After the critique was published, one of the co-writers, who was a professor at Pacific Lutheran Seminary, was immediately attacked, and the administration moved to have her fired. In a chapter in Rebecca's book, she writes, "What they dreamed is ours to do." That was written by the Puritan Richard Mather in 1644. The covenant, constant and frequent acts of communion performed by a company of saints together. We talked about covenant last week. Rebecca writes, "By our acts of worshiping in a Unitarian Universalist congregation, by structuring our life together to give room for experience, voice, and vote of each person, and joining together to resist injustice, our spirits have fallen in communion with the feisty, free-spirited Puritans of 450 years ago who advocated for freedom of religion. We fall into communion with the sweet-spirited Universalists of old who rejected the notion of a God as a tyrant ruling by the threat of hell. And they named God love. And we have fallen into communion with the Iowa Sisterhood who fought for women's rights. And we've fallen into communion with the deep-feeling transcendentalists who insisted religion can't be found in the dry bones of the past, but must be discovered firsthand. I was reminded when I read these words by Rebecca Parker of Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed's conversion experience that happened right here in this sanctuary. How many of you know this story? It was written up in, it was on the Church of the Larger Fellowship page. Mark and Donna Morrison Reed were co-ministers at the time at First Universalist Church of Rochester. Mark was a lifelong UU, raised in Chicago as a Unitarian, and he was steeped in Unitarianism, but not so much Universalism. And it was the fall of 1980 in the annual meeting of the New York State Convention of Universalists. He wrote about his experience. He said, "The Apostle Paul experienced a conversion on the road to Damascus. I experienced mine after arriving late in Buffalo, New York." Conversion is a definitive, sometimes overpowering moment that brings one to embrace a religious faith. You almost never hear of a Unitarian Universalist speak of having had a conversion experience, he writes, a moment which divides one life into before and after, a moment in which there is a spiritual transformation, a shift in one's inner reality that changes the way one views the world. Such a moment, he writes, seized me, and I was transformed from a Unitarian into a Universalist. The sanctuary in Buffalo, with its stained glass carved beams and large choir loft, evokes a sense of sacred space. I sat half looking, half listening until Gordon McKeown said, Universalism came to be called the gospel of God's success, the gospel of the larger hope. Picturesquely spoken, the image was that of a last unrepentant sinner being dragged kicking and screaming into heaven, unable to resist the power of the love of the Almighty. Suddenly, Mark said, I got it. This, Universalism, was the religion of radical and overpowering love. Universal salvation insists that no matter what we do, God loves us so that she will not and cannot consign even a single human being to eternal damnation. You know, Universalism was pretty radical in the 18th century when Jonathan Edwards was terrifying his congregations with this horrific fiery hell in his sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. Universalists were heretics. We choose our faith. Unitarians believe at most in one God, and Universalists believe ultimately everyone will be reconciled with God. And both traditions rejected the notion of predestination and saw Jesus as something other than God. And they were excommunicated, imprisoned, burned at the stake, or thrown into exile. Unitarian Jack Mendelson wrote, tragedy and death stalked those who first laid the foundations in Europe that was to bear the Unitarian and Universalist names. The Unitarian controversy in the early 19th century waged on for 2 decades as the liberal Congregationalists parted ways with the more conservative. The Unitarian Association of America was formed in 1825. We can thank William Ellery Channing, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Theodore Parker, and others for their wisdom and courage to move us in a direction of honest religion, away from doctrine and creed and dogma. And I really love how the Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Strong articulates the shift that we made. She writes, we have responded to an angry God with a loving God. We have asserted that God is one. We affirmed Jesus as a teacher and a prophet of God. And we have affirmed the worthiness of humankind, of truths unknown and to be known, and that all religions have some truth, but no religion has all the truth. And we have moved with an evolving culture and an increased knowledge with reason, faith, hope, tolerance, love, and freedom. But we still continue to this day to be misunderstood. Don't ask me how, but my husband discovered a video on YouTube yesterday of a Baptist preacher from New Mexico attempting to explain the heretical cult of Unitarians and Universalists. He told his congregation that both groups had no founders, and nobody knows why these two cults got together in 1961. But it was probably like, nobody likes us and nobody likes you, so let's just get together. I swear this is what he said. He went on to say, Unitarians believe in the oneness of God. Sounds good, but the concept of God gets really squirrely to where they don't even really have one. They don't have a concept of God. You can believe anything you want. If you want to believe in space monkeys, it's okay. Oh dear. Do you think we should invite him over for some enemy pie? I much prefer Garrison Keillor's humor. Unitarians are just Quakers with a attention deficit disorder. And this is my favorite story. Once upon a time, a Unitarian died in a small town that had no UU church. Her family asked the local Methodist pastor to perform the funeral service. The minister, unsure about the request, contacted the bishop to get permission, and the bishop's prompt answer came back: permission granted, bury all the Unitarians you can. So I do want to, I'm going to run a little late, but I want to tell you about Richard Gilbert, in Rochester, asked the question, do we merit the wind we inherit? All jokes aside, we do. We are so lucky to have inherited this faith. You are so lucky to have the secret weapon of this gorgeous sanctuary that actually causes a conversion experience for a lifelong Unitarian who's a professor, who's written books, and the music we have. I mean, this is your secret weapon. So I'm going to tell you about Reverend Marlon Lavenhar of the Church, UU Church of Tulsa. Marlon's church is a role model for us, and this story was published in UU World Magazine. And you may have heard of this black Pentecostal preacher named Bishop Carlton Pearson. Anybody? There's a documentary made about him. He had the most popular TV show in Trinity Broadcasting Network, and his traditional Christian theology was based on a literal interpretation of the Bible. Jesus Christ was the only way to heaven. Pearson's church had grown to 6,000 members. And one day, he had an epiphany. Sorry about that. He had discovered the gospel of inclusion, as he calls it, and we call it universalism. It occurred to him as he was watching the news about the genocide in Rwanda that the poor victims were bound for hell. This is what his fundamentalist Christian religion taught him. How could that be? He received a message really clearly from God, he said, that there is no hell and that all people shall be included in God's love. He said he could barely contain himself and wanted to shout it from the rooftops. He said, we got it wrong. We misinterpreted. Instead of the Bible being the inspired word of God, it's probably just the inspired word of man about God. They called him a heretic. His church dwindled from 6,000 to 200 after his revelation, and they lost their building, they lost almost everything, until the Unitarian Universalists, All Souls Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, invited them into their space. Pearson confessed that before, and he'd drive by the All Souls Church, he used to pray for the devil to be cast out of that church. And he said, but I ended up being cast into it. He's very funny. I watched a sermon that he did in February, like yesterday, and sadly he is dealing with a really life-threatening cancer at the moment. So send him love, because he's quite a remarkable man. So Carlton was invited to preach at All Souls, and to make a long story short, pretty soon the congregations were one. They joined one another. Marlon writes, All Souls will never be the same. And they adjusted to the influx of 200 African-American members. The music rocked the rafters. People swayed with the beat. There was more theistic language. And some people stopped coming, and they started to reduce their pledges, but more people came. And pretty soon the neighbors were complaining about the 17% increase in traffic on Sunday mornings. So Marlon explained to his members, our history is filled with people rejected for their religious beliefs. This is something we share with them. We're on this ship together. It's full of excitement and possibility. We are living out our covenant, our statement of purpose. It has forced us to change. It is not forsaking Unitarian Universalists. It's being a Unitarian Universalist. What is holy about our heresy is not what we believe, but how we believe. All Souls Church has been truly transformed and continue to this day. That was 2009. To this day, they are still being transformed, and they are transforming the community around them. So we are in a difficult time in our history. Harvard Law School professor Michael Claremont warns that American democracy is more under threat than it has been in the lifetime of anyone alive today. He isn't the only one sounding the alarm. While people out there are calling for civil war to save white supremacy culture, we must be practicing radical and transforming love like all souls. But first, we must come to terms with our history, the history that Bob Dylan wrote about. As Marlon said, it's about becoming who we say we are. Like All Souls Tulsa, we must be willing to be radically transformed so that one day our vision of radically transforming the world is possible. And we can do this. It's in our DNA. It's woven into our Unitarian and Universalist bones. Just about every 19th century Universalist was involved in social justice. The list is a mile long. If you're interested, on the website and just Google famous UUs. Our faith is a religion of radical and empowering, overpowering love. Holy heresy is the gift that we have inherited, and it's what our ancestors dreamed is our work to do now. This church is more than a historic building with a beautiful sanctuary. It is a sacred space that has the history, the DNA of all of the people who came before, who founded Unitarianism and Universalism in the 1800s here in Buffalo. My good friend Nancy Schaefer, who is a poet, wrote me a poem after I lost my daughter in 2004, and she finally got it done in 2009, and every verse is separated by this. The question, always the question, is what does love do now? I am honored to be with you on this journey. Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing hymn number 298, Wake Now My Senses.
Please remain standing and say with me the words to extinguish our chalice as written in your order of service. As we extinguish the flame of this chalice, may we carry its light with us into the world, in the power of peace, faith, justice, and love.
Bishop Shelby Spong, an Episcopalian priest who's a proud heretic in his own tradition, encourages us to love wastefully. In our closing words, Elena Westbrook reminds us that when love is accompanied with hope, it makes all the difference. Beloveds, go in hope, for the arc of the universe is long, and we can bend it towards justice. Go in courage, for together we have the strength to confront injustice in our daily lives and the larger world. And go in love, because a holy and generous love is both the reason and the means by which we will transform our lives. Seated.
everybody.